the breaking news about Joe Kent,
Yeah.
director of National Counterterrorism Center. He resigned in protest against the imposed war on Iran. And he said that I cannot, in good conscience, support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. And it's clear that we started the war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. And we had Donald Trump responding and talking about what has happened and how he feels about, the resignation of Joe Kent. Here is what he said.
President, your director of national counterterrorism, Joe Kent, he just resigned today. He said he can't support your conflict with Iran. What's your reaction to that? And did you?
Well, I read his statement. I always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security. I didn't know him well, but I thought he seemed like a pretty nice guy. But when I read his statement, I realized that it's a good thing that he's out, because he said that Iran was not a threat. Iran was a threat. Every country realized what a threat Iran was. The question is whether or not they wanted to do something about it. And many people, many of the greatest military scholars are saying for years that presidents should have taken out Iran because they wanted a nuclear weapon. They were, if we didn't do the attack, or if, I'll go a step further, if I didn't terminate the Iran nuclear deal given to us, one of the worst deals ever made, by Barack Hussein Obama. Remember when they sent Boeing 757s over there, loaded with cash?
Yeah.
Do you have the letter in front of you? Do you have Joe Kent's letter in front of you?
Yeah.
Read the about the third paragraph from the bottom. It's the one about his wife.
Let me just find it here. Yeah, he's talking about his wife was lost in Syria.
Yeah.
And was killed in Syria.
Yeah.
And that's why he hates the war, and that's why he feels this way about the war, these endless wars in the Middle East.
And you got to know Joe Kent before. Joe Kent was really a MAGA staple. He was a MAGA beast. And for him to do this, kind of like Charlie Kirk having his, epiphany about Israel, for him to do this is remarkable because he was an attack dog for MAGA. And that's why they put him in the position they did. And Trump's remarks there were just stupid. Everybody knows that Donald Trump and Joe Kent were pretty close. He wouldn't have made him head of the counterterrorism center if they weren't. So this turnaround and that expression of, pain caused by the loss of his wife tells me that Joe Kent had gotten, a real epiphany himself about what this war is all about and what Syria was all about, because that's what he's saying, really. And what everything Trump has done with regard to that region, and for that matter, with regard to Ukraine too, and Venezuela, and potentially Cuba, threatened on Greenland, is Donald Trump. That's Donald Trump. In other words, he's worse than any of the worst Western Roman Empire Caesars that we seem to think we know so much about, whether it be Caligula or Nero or any of the others that were more or less on the bottom of the heap. Trump is worse. And that's what Joe Kent is saying. Charlie Kirk said it about the connection with Israel. Now Joe Kent has said it about Donald Trump.
Do you expect Tulsi Gabbard doing something?
I would think that we were talking about that this morning. Who's next? It's got to be Tulsi. She simply has to do something to resurrect her future. She's not a stupid woman. She's a smart woman. She's a good politician. She had the right feelings about the JCPOA after much study of it. She knew more about the JCPOA than I did when I walked in to brief her. I stopped the briefing. I brought 3 experts with me. Trita Parsi. I brought other people with me. And I said, ma'am, Congresswoman, we don't need to waste your time. You know more about it than we do. All we're going to do is culminate this briefing, get out of your office, and ask you to be with us for it rather than against it. And she said, I will make my decision. I'm still studying. So she needs to resurrect herself. She's got a lot of potential. She's still young. But if she stays with this ship till it goes down, she's finished.
The whole agenda, Larry, somehow falling apart. It's not just because, when you see Europeans are not that much into getting involved in offensive against Iran, that shows that something going on, and not just in the United States, outside of the United States. Because so far, we cannot say that Europeans were not involved so far. Since day one, they were trying to help the United States defensively, and they tried to defend Israel. But they're not that much, they don't want to be part of this offensive in the Strait of Hormuz. They see that's a red line, as I don't know if we can put it this way. But the whole concept, the whole rhetoric is just falling apart. And you see who's the establishment, who's not the establishment. For example, Mike Johnson today came out and totally defending Donald Trump. And here is what he said, Larry.
Yeah.
On the Gang of Eight, I got all the briefings. We all understood there was clearly an imminent threat, that Iran was very close to the enrichment of nuclear capability, and they were building missiles at a pace that no one in the region could keep up with. They were far outpacing our allies and friends and us in our defense capability, because we had personnel, installations, members of the armed services, and civilians in the region. Iran was building up ballistic missiles at such a rapid pace, and we knew that their plan was to fire them upon Americans. The commander-in-chief and his administration had a very difficult decision to make. I don't know where Joe Kent is getting his information, but he wasn't in those briefings, clearly, because the Secretary of State, the Secretary of War, and everyone, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Kane, they had exquisite intelligence, and we understood that this was a serious moment for us. Had the president waited, I am personally convinced that we would have mass casualties of Americans, service members and others, and our installations would have been dramatically damaged. And so we had to, the president felt that he had to strike first to prevent those mass casualties. That's a summary. I can't tell you the classified part, but that's a summary that's made public, and it's accurate. Yes, Manu.
Let me just tell you what he didn't say. This is what Johnson would have said had he been honest and free with his words. Maybe at the beginning, maybe in the middle, maybe at the end. And we are on God's side. We are on Jesus Christ's side. And we are going to triumph, because it is time for Jesus to come back down. It is time for Armageddon. It is time for the end times. That's what Mike Johnson would have said if he didn't think it would be at that point politically bad to say that from the speaker's rostrum, because that's Mike Johnson.
You know what?
Otherwise, it was mostly lies. There wasn't consensus. No question in my mind now, after exploring it more fully, there wasn't consensus. And certainly Kane, if he didn't advise against it, he gave enough information that any commander-in-chief with half a brain would have said, maybe I'm not going here, and picked up the phone and called Bibi Netanyahu and told him to cease and desist, because he wouldn't be with him. Because Bibi would not have gone had the president put his foot down and said that to him. Johnson's lying through his teeth. He's lying through his teeth.
He's the way that he's talking, his point of view is one of the main reasons that the people came out and voted for Donald Trump. They thought that Donald Trump would be different, but they see that Donald Trump is the same. And those people like Joe Kent, like Tucker Carlson, they're
disgusted. They're disgusted with their own people, if you will, because they got led down the primrose path by a lot of people making arguments with which they were sympathetic. Hell, I'm sympathetic with some of the arguments. I'm sympathetic with the argument that we don't need to have wars in the Middle East, stupid wars like Iraq and Syria and Libya and Afghanistan and so forth. That was what Trump was saying. And that's what attracted them to him. Go back and look at those comments. And I wish Johnson would have had Bibi Netanyahu up on the right screen while he was saying what he was saying, where Bibi says over and over and over again for 20 years, Iran is going to have a nuclear weapon in a week or two. Iran is going to have a nuclear weapon next year. Iran is at 90% enrichment. They'll have a nuclear. How many times did Bibi say that? And Johnson was just saying the same thing. This is all manufactured garbage in order to support a president who has absolutely reversed himself on his main tenet with regard to national security. No more stupid wars. Did you listen to me, people? And especially no more stupid wars in the Middle East. That's what he said repeatedly. That's why they voted for him, many of them. That's why they voted. Now he's losing them. He's losing them so fast, it's like rats jumping off a sinking ship. And Johnson is going to stay there till the ship goes down, because Johnson believes it's the end times. He believes God is directing this war.
Larry, what does Donald Trump want from Europeans and from NATO allies? When he mentions that they're not helping us. Here is Donald Trump criticizing Europeans.
And all of the NATO allies agreed with us, but they don't want to, despite the fact that we help them so much. We have thousands of soldiers in different countries all over the world, and they don't want to help us, which is amazing. I mean, amazing. And I didn't do a full court press because I think if I did, they probably would be. But we don't need help. That war has been long prosecuted, as far as I'm concerned, almost from day one. We knocked out many of these things. We knocked out the Navy essentially in a couple of days.
They don't have a Navy to speak of, so he knocked out a Navy they don't have to speak of. He knocked out an Air Force that was so old it couldn't fly. The only thing they have, Nima, the only thing they have is ballistic missiles, and they have plenty of them. Yeah. And, Churchill is always quoted as saying everything that ever was said in the world. But Churchill said the only thing worse than having allies is not having them. Donald, you need to go to school. You need to go to military school. You need to learn what it means to not have allies. And he's losing them, rapidly losing them. And he's losing them because they don't want to do stupid things like he does. And in one case, at least, the Spanish leader, he's losing them because the guy has a sense of ethics and morality. And oh, by the way, did you know 2 more countries joined the case against Israel in the court? 2 more countries. I think before we're through with this, we're going to have anywhere from 30 to 40 countries signing up to South Africa's application to the court for prosecuting Bibi Netanyahu. And you've got more countries each time that if he enters that country, he gets arrested immediately.
Do you feel that Joe, knows? I'm talking about the Joe Kent. Does he know something that we don't know in terms of the casualties or in terms of what has happened so far because somehow when he criticizing what has happened in Syria, it shows that he's concerned about American lives as well.
Yes.
And it's not just about, and what is the Trump administration, putting out? They're putting out the casualties 6, 7, but there is an interview recently, it was today on Press TV, a senior Iranian intelligence official. He's speaking to the Press TV saying that the United States suffered over 3,200 casualties and staggering equipment losses in the first week of the war. And the two side doesn't come together. The two picture doesn't match, and that's many of us. Is that possible that Donald Trump is hiding something?
Well, I know he's hiding casualties. I don't know if he knows he's hiding casualties because people are afraid to tell him the truth, especially if it's an adverse truth. They don't want to tell him. And the military is no exception to that. They won't tell him either. And let's just back up a minute and say, no matter where you look in America's history, even go all the way back to George Washington and the Revolutionary War, less so there because Washington was probably one of the most upright military commanders we've ever had, and ethical too. America's lied about its casualties in wars. We lied in Korea. We lied in Vietnam. We lied in World War II. We lied in World War I. Wilson was an inveterate liar. We don't ever tell the American people the cost of our decisions to go to war in the full until well after the war is over. Take the German counteroffensive in the Ardennes, where we lost 78,000 in less than 4 weeks. 78,000. That's more casualties than General MacArthur took in the entire war in the Pacific and the Southwest Pacific Theater in which he was in charge. So, and we didn't tell anybody. We didn't tell the American people. It didn't flow back immediately. So, yeah, there's lying going on, but I don't know if Trump is doing it himself intentionally or he's just not very well informed. I don't know what the total count is, but I know it's well over 100. I don't know that Iran's figures are anywhere near accurate either. There's just no way to verify it because there's such a lockdown on real information, starting with the master locker down, Bibi Netanyahu. For example, I think the casualties in Israel are fairly large, but he's not reporting anything. And the newspapers, even Haaretz, are reporting something like, well, an Israeli was killed today walking across the street, or an Israeli was wounded, but he wasn't wounded badly. She wasn't wounded badly, whatever. A schoolgirl was hit with a flying piece of fragment off a drone that Iron Dome had shot down. That's the way they couch their casualties. But I know they have more casualties than that. I know that, for example, 25 to 30% of the 90,000+ call up of the reserves went AWOL, didn't get called up because they didn't want to go to Lebanon. So lies are just throughout this thing, and they've been there from the start. We lied about the diplomacy. We've lied about the war. We've lied about the casualties. We're lying about Iran's capacity to withstand us. Just the president saying we destroyed their Navy. Okay. What Navy? What boats did you destroyed? A few little boats? Little boats? Yeah, you destroyed a few little boats. Okay. You torpedoed one against international law. It was in international waters coming back from an exercise with India, and you torpedoed it. Oh, that was another war crime to go up to our credit. I don't know how to parse this administration with regard to truth. They do not tell the truth. They have made a living on lying. So it's extremely difficult to say what's happening. We know, for example, that the hospital in Landstuhl, Germany, because we have people there, we know that the hospital has, and the press has even carried some of this, it's told pregnant women to go away. It's told civilians in general to go away. It normally serves the community there. It has a really fairly substantial throughput capacity for the central part of Europe in order to send casualties back to America or wherever they need to go for treatment. We know that they've shut down civilian care, and we know that casualties are coming into Landstuhl. But we don't know how many yet, and we don't have someone standing there counting them coming in, but we know they're coming in. And we know, for example, that Iran very carefully, painstakingly even, took out 4 to 5 of the most important radars in ancillary countries. And when they took out those radars, they created casualties. These are, in some $200 to $300 million radars. One of them, as I understand it, was $500 million, $500 million. They took them all out with drones and missiles, and blinded us in that capacity for that time. And they, as I said, there were casualties at each of those sites when they took them out. We know that the embassy in Baghdad has been hit inside the green zone, but we don't know the casualties. Rubio's hiding that. So, you know, how will you ever know what the real casualty count is? But we do know that significant casualties have already been taken, both civilian and military.
Lindsey Graham says that Europe's refusal to provide the United States with assistance in the war with Iran will have broad and deep consequences because Donald Trump is angrier than ever. What, Larry, let me ask, because you didn't have the time to answer the question with that clip. What do they want from Europe? What is Europe capable of that the United States cannot do it in the Strait of Hormuz, for example?
Well, I don't think the United States can do it in the Strait of Hormuz. I really don't. So what they're looking for is the kind, first of all, the military is looking for is the kind of help we anticipated that interoperability with NATO forces would provide. And a case in point, we don't have a real fleet of minesweepers. We have some ships that have been called minesweepers because they were in the LCS class, you know, the one Lockheed sent off the waves one day, the first one they built and it broke in half. So this is a really lousy class of ships, if you will, in most sailors' eyes. But we converted them. We didn't want to fess up that we spent hundreds of millions of dollars on ships that didn't work and had no utility. So we converted them into minesweepers in some cases. Now, it's a real problem. Some of them have a metallic hull rather than a laminated plastic hull. So they're not very good as minesweepers. They detect mines. They attract mines if they have metal hulls. All to say that we depend on other countries in NATO who do have minesweepers, who practice it all the time and are very good at it. And that was supposed to be a part of the alliance. If we went to war under Article 5, if we went to war, they would provide the minesweeping. Same with other specialty areas. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for those specialty areas that NATO countries have in excess of what we have, especially minesweeping, to come to the Gulf and help us. And they don't want to do that. And I don't blame them one bit. The way Trump has treated Europe up to this point, if I were a European leader, I would look back at Trump and say, you son of a bitch, would you like me to play the tape you had of your vice president over here at the Munich Security Conference? Would you like me to play the tape of Marco Rubio talking about it? Would you like me to play a tape of you talking about us? Because you're the person who started this split. Now, it was over Ukraine principally, but there are other issues too. Trump made some egregious statements about what NATO had to offer to America's defense, and they didn't forget them. And they've got some real reasons for not really being cooperative. You've got the Spanish leader who's doing it, I think, for moral and ethical purposes, and I applaud him. He has moral courage. But you've got other leaders doing it because they got their own problems. They have significant problems. Look at what they just did in the EU. They passed a law about the time of the special military operations starting almost 5 years ago. They passed a law that they would never buy again Arctic LNG from Russia. It's really sweet, the deal they had with Russia. It goes in European bottoms down to Bremerhaven or Le Havre or one of the other ports. And they take everything in their own bottoms. They put their own ships in there. All Russia does is top them off. Russia gets the money and everything's copacetic. And the Europeans have LNG out the yin-yang. What did they just do? They just bought all of Russia's Arctic LNG, and it's going to be shipped down to Europe now. And what did they say when someone said in the press, I was watching it, I forget who the leader was, why did you do that? You said you were going to not do that anymore. You're punishing Russia. Well, it doesn't start till January 27. Do we think they're going to stop in January 27? Hell no, they're not, because they've got to have that LNG. We're not going to supplement that LNG to the point where they can get off Russia. And they're going to have to open the pipelines back up too, Nima, eventually. So Russia's not happy with the way the United States is waging this conflict in Iran. Not happy at all. Okay, so you got to deal with Russia. You got to deal with them in the future, or you are going to be shit out of luck, pardon my French, with regard to your economies. You're already staggering from what we did to Nord Stream. What we did to Nord Stream, you're already being punished for that. Europe's got to figure itself out. It's got to sort itself out. And one of the sorting things it has to do is it can't trust Donald Trump any more than Putin can, any more than anyone in Iran can, any more than anyone in the world can. That's the reality of the United States of America today. No one can trust us.